Welcome back to Rise to Liberty podcast. We've got a wonderful show for you today, but real quick, I do want to go ahead and drop our sponsor, which is Nadu Shave Company. This is absolutely the best razor. You hear me say it every single time. Seriously, guys, I would not, invite these guys on to be a sponsor if I didn't actually believe in this product. It is a veteran owned, family operated business. Stop buying this China made plastic multi blade razor crap. There is a reason why our fathers, grandfathers used these single blade safety razors for so long. There's a reason why it was the standard. Not to mention, I mean, these companies, I'll even call them by name, Gillette, Harry's, all of these companies, they don't give a shit about you at all. Not to mention, Nadu has the balls to sponsor this show. So go to NADEAUSHAVECO.com, use promo code RISE15 to get 15% off. You will not be disappointed. Make sure they know that I sent you over. That helps out the show, helps you. Nadu Shave Company, where tradition beats modernity. Now, today, real quick, scan that QR code. That's everything for the show. And now, to today's guest, we have Luke, which I'll kind of let him explain it. However, he has come on today to talk about something near and dear to my heart, also near and dear to his, and that is peaceful parenting. How you doing today, Luke?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on the show. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. Like I was saying, this is something incredibly important to me, and obviously it is to you. But before we get into just that, who are you, and why should anyone care?
Yeah, well, my name is Luke Adsit. I'm a peaceful parenting coach. I help people who don't know what to do with parenting when their kids are acting up, they're misbehaving, they're throwing tantrums. I help them figure out why those things are happening and what they should do. And I help them to do those things without using any punishments, any rewards, bribes, raised voices, really just respecting children's rights, respecting their humanity, and treating them as best as we possibly can to make them the kind of people we want them to be, and not just to get them to do what we need them to do in the moment.
That's absolutely incredible. So you are a coach, so people can get a hold of you and come to you for your services, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
And so what exactly do you offer? I mean, just in kind of like an overview sense, what kind of services can they actually get from you?
Yeah, so the program that I offer is an 8-week coaching program. So in 8 weeks, I'll help parents reduce recurring tantrums or misbehavior by 90%. And so I'll work with them on a case-by-case basis, give them individualized feedback, and help them figure out exactly what's going on and just help them see the blind spots that's really hard for them to see for themselves.
So, we'll just dive feet first. What is peaceful parenting? Like, where did this come from? Like, I mean, those two words together, they sound great, but what what is it?
Yeah, so peaceful parenting is the idea that children have just as many rights as the rest of us, and that we should treat them with respect, right? And so just because they're smaller or weaker or their brains aren't as developed, that doesn't mean that we have to, that we are allowed to treat them however we want, right? And so this philosophy of parenting, it kind of stemmed from the libertarian movement, or at least that's where it gained a lot of traction. Some of your listeners may be familiar with this guy called Stefan Molyneux. He was really sold on the idea, and as are a lot of libertarians, on the non-aggression principle. And so the idea that it's never okay to use force or any kind of aggression unless it's in self-defense. And so, yeah, that he extended that idea to parenting. And so it's the idea that we can never hit children, we can never take things from them or aggress against them in any way, as long as it's not in self-defense, right? And so that's kind of where peaceful parenting comes from.
Okay. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense to me. Like, obviously, they, like you just said, they're just smaller, just not quite as developed people. So why would it be any different? And so, I mean, this is can get into kind of heavy topics. So definitely, if there's anything that you're uncomfortable with, just let me know. But I guess my first question would be is how were you raised? Did you experience any level uh of of parenting that might go against what you believe nowadays as a peaceful parenting coach?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm willing to talk about this kind of stuff, and definitely a trigger warning for the audience.
Yeah.
But no, I was raised in a house that used corporal punishment, and I was spanked all the way up until I think about fourth grade or so, and starting really early. And yeah, I I was not looking back as an adult as I start to hear about these ideas. I am, I was, and I still am, kind of frustrated that why didn't my parents use resources that have existed for a long time? Why did they choose to just use coercion instead of talking to me and listening to me? So yes, I've certainly been the recipient of corporal punishment, and I know what that's like, and I know how frustrating it is to be on the receiving end of that.
So so it's definitely something that you have experience with, and I think most people do. I'm not sure what your experience is with this, but I've had conversations with older people almost my entire life. All of my friends have always been older. I spend a lot of time with my family and everything, which I'm one of the youngest in the family, and so everyone's older than me. And I've always heard it's almost like a faux pas at this point. It's like, well, we all got the belt, or we all got the wooden spoons, or like my parents were always yelling at me. Like I've heard it from coworkers, family, like all of these different people throughout my life. And and yet it seems like a lot of it kind of carries over. And it's while we didn't I would say we're pretty close in age, so I would say our generation, it's probably less so that we got the belt, or we didn't get hit with wooden spoons or anything. I mean, we still got aggressive parenting, even some abuse parenting in many aspects. So has that been your experience as well? As that it seems to be getting better, but it's still not quite there.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, both of my parents, they were disciplined with the belt. They were both belted. When I was a child, I never was hit with a belt. I did on some occasions get the wooden spoon, and definitely the hand. But yeah, so I have noticed that a lot of, I think, millennials are swinging away from that. They didn't like growing up in a house with corporal punishment, and I think the pendulum is actually swinging from authoritarianism to even permissiveness. And so I think so both authoritarianism and permissive parenting are both a win lose. Authoritarian is the parent wins and the child loses. I don't care what you think. You have to do what I say. It's my way or the highway. Permissive parenting is the kid wins and the parent loses. Whatever you want, I'll just give it to you. I'll just give in. I'll keep appeasing. Peaceful parenting is right in the middle, and it's win-win. It's, I really care what you think, but also I have some firm boundaries and expectations, and I'm not going to let you hurt yourself. I'm not going to let you cross these lines. So it's that balance of keeping my expectations firm, my reasonable expectations, but I still really care what you think. I'm really going to be intentional about listening to you and making you as happy as possible without crossing those boundaries.
Yeah. So I think you hit on a very important point, that it seems like the pendulum has definitely swung in the complete opposite direction, which I think is actually more of a lose-lose for everyone, because I mean, in the long run, even though the kid's getting what they want, they're still losing in the long run. They're not getting that structure and those boundaries, which no kid will ever admit this, but they actually do want. So I think you did hit on a very good point there, that it's an overcorrection. So is that something you see a lot with your clients? Is this like overcorrection of just kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, giving in to their kids?
Yeah, well, a lot of my clients, they actually they used to be spanked, or I'm sorry, they used to spank their kids, and now they've come around to the idea that, well, maybe I shouldn't do that either, and they are realizing I have no idea what to do besides just punish, besides spank or use timeouts or take away privileges, and so I help parents figure out how to reason with their kids at all, how to listen to their concerns. What does it mean? Are they really disrespecting me and disobeying me, and do they deserve punishment? Or, are they just trying to communicate something to me? Are they trying to tell me they're upset? And so that's what I help parents do. Yeah.
So it's not that there isn't any punishment with peaceful parenting. It's just that it's not physical.
No, I would recommend against the use of any punishment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, punishment always assumes that the problem is motivation. So the kid knows what he needs to do, and he just lacks the motivation to get there. When in reality, when kids are behaving, it's almost never because they just don't have the motivation to act the right way. Think about if you or I, if we're trying to eat healthy, we do want to avoid the ice cream or the soda or the potato chips. But sometimes, there's a different part of us that also really wants to eat that. And so kids need help having that inner dialogue, figuring out, why is it valuable to actually do this based on his own merit rather than having extrinsic motivation. Because when we give extrinsic motivation, we rob them of the opportunity to learn the actual intrinsic value of why an activity is worth doing based on its own merits.
So reasoning with a child is for one going to be a lot healthier. Whereas correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems as though, I mean, children kind of depend upon their parents to teach them the way of the world, and they might not know or understand how to express themselves in a particular way. And so, I mean, even as adults, that tends to come out in anger sometimes in a lot of people. And so is that kind of fair to say, that maybe a child is acting out or something because they don't exactly understand how to express themselves?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It's not, it's almost never helpful to just jump to assumptions about why a kid is acting out.
Yeah.
It really does take some questions, some sometimes guessing if they're not very verbal. Um, but yeah, I mean, if a kid is acting out, if he's hitting his younger sibling, maybe he just wants attention. Maybe he feels neglected. Maybe he knows that's just a surefire way to get your attention. Maybe he's mad because something feels unfair. There could be a deeper issue, and there almost always is a deeper issue besides the fact that he just really felt like hurting someone, and that seemed like a great idea. And he's just some
Yeah.
sadist or something. And if that's the case, you have a whole nother set of problems that you need to deal with. But just jumping to that assumption is just not helpful.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of seems unhealthy on the part of the parent as well. Is if you're just going to assume that your kid's a little psychopath, then that's not going to do much for your parenting or for their childhood.
Right.
So say I'm a parent, I want your services, and so I sign up. Do you kind of want to walk through kind of like the first stages, like how do we get this going if I'm a parent that wants to come to you to learn?
Yeah. So I would start by just asking them, finding out about what problems they're encountering. What is the recurring issue that is coming up? Are the kids throwing tantrums? Are the kids a little bit older and they have different problems? And so I would take different tacks with different ages of kids. Toddlers, they they have no capacity for impulse control until they're 3.5, right? So expecting a toddler to have the self-control of a grown adult is just never going to work out, right?
Yeah.
So I find out what the issue is, and then we'll take things from there. And if they're older and verbal and able to articulate their feelings, the child, I would teach the parents a few different frameworks that I like to use, exactly what to say, and a step-by-step guide on how to figure out what's going on for the kid, what questions to ask, how to ask those questions in a way that doesn't seem intimidating or interrogating, and then how to explain your concerns which is a step a lot of parents skip. It's helping kids understand why this expectation is here, and not just you have to do it or else, right?
Yeah.
And
Which
then
never works.
right, it doesn't. And then I would help them figure out how to come to an agreement on how to proceed with the kid. And then when you have their agreement, they're much more likely to go along with it because they're part of the deal making process, the rule making process, rather than just having mandates come from above. And so yeah, that's a few of the things that I would help parents with.
So, speaking with you, I'm kind of curious, because I definitely like the insider information. Do you seem to be helping more of the kids or more of the parents, in general, of course, because every case is going to be unique. But does it seem like you're more, helping the kids understand, or are you more helping the parents understand in general?
Yeah, 100%. I'm working with the parents, helping the parents figure out what they're doing wrong, what mistakes they're making. And 100% of the time, the parents are making some significant mistakes, which is leading the kid to act out. And if you had someone all powerful and 5 times your size that was in some subtle, some not so subtle ways mistreating you and not treating you with respect, you'd get really frustrated too. So the reactions kids have, I don't really blame them for it. It's quite reasonable. And so I'm talking to the person in the relationship that has all the power and sets the tone and is responsible for all the influences in this kid's life and is modeling behavior for them. That's who I need to get doing the right thing.
So trying to think of the best way to ask this. What are some examples that you could give that you have previously had? Obviously, no personal information. That's not the important part anyways. But what are some examples of some things where, because I'll say a lot, it seems as though parents view this as, I have an out of control kid. It doesn't seem so much of anything that I, the parent, am doing. So is there any sort of an example of something that you could give that you've worked with a past client to kind of help alleviate some of this buildup?
Yeah. Um, so I had one client who, their kid, he never wanted to do his homeschool homework, and he was about 12 years old, I think. And so I what he would do is he would say, okay, well, I'm going to take your privileges away if you don't do your homework on time. The parent would get really frustrated because this was a recurring issue. So I said, okay, well, why don't you find a time outside of the heat of the moment? It's not in the middle of the time when you need him to do his homework right now. So it's not stressful. Tempers aren't flaring. No one's angry or upset. And so you just find, and I think the time that worked for him was like a Saturday morning. They were driving in the car, and I said, why don't you just have a chat with them? And so he just brought up the issue. He said, hey, kiddo, I've noticed that sometimes you haven't been doing your homework before it's due. Can you just tell me what's up? What's going on? And so it's a very low pressure way to bring up that question. And I wasn't there, so I can't tell you the exact details of that conversation. But he was able to listen and to connect with his son about what was going on there, and then he was able to tell him his concerns, right? And so one of the issues they were running into was they would get really heated, and so like before working with me, he would just put more and more pressure until or the kid would resist and resist until they were both just screaming at each other, and then nothing ever was solved as soon as both of them are in that fight or flight mindset, and just reason has just left the building.
Yeah.
And so one of the emphasis I like to teach my clients is, whatever you can, stay away from the fight or flight response. Do whatever you can to lower the pressure. Everything but power struggles is what I teach my clients to do.
That's, I mean, it makes so much sense. Like, and I think that's, let me know what you think, but I think that's why it it's so logical and so reasonable that it kind of just seems like it's almost impossible. It's like, well, parenting can't be this easy, you know. Like, do you kind of feel that way, that it's just like people kind of complicate things, that it doesn't need to be this hard?
Yeah, and it's even harder when that's the only thing this kid has ever known for their entire life. The more and more you reason with them, the better and better they'll get at reasoning. But a kid who's never ever been reasoned with and has only ever been bribed or punished into doing things, he won't be good at reasoning. So it will take some practice. It will take some regrowing of the trust that parents have broken.
Yeah.
Punishing them has broken that trust. And so, yeah, it's totally possible. And I think a lot of people and a lot of parents have no idea just how reasonable kids can be if you consistently reason with them, and if you refuse to do anything that would threaten that bond and threaten the trust.
Yeah. So I know I've heard this a lot as well, is that, you know, e- even though I speak to my kid, I try to reason with my kid and everything, they just keep acting out. They won't open up. And then there's just extenuating circumstances to where I would use a swat on the butt, and whatever that swat on the butt means to somebody, because one swat could be the other person's spank. But what would you say to somebody that would say something like that to you? How would you handle a parent like that?
Yeah, I would say that if you're willing to use force or threat of a force in, as a last case scenario, as a last line of defense, it completely changes the whole interaction. So if you're not willing to ever go there, you'll try a lot harder to find out what's really going on with the kid, really get to the root cause of the issue. And I can use an analogy here. Think about if a guy's asking a girl out on a date, you know, especially if the guy's bigger and stronger, like parents are bigger and stronger than their kids. If that guy has in the back of his mind, okay, I'm going to ask this girl out, but if she says no, I'm willing to kidnap her. That's good. That's going to change the whole interaction, and
Yeah.
the lady will sense that, and she'll be freaked out, and everything will be completely different, as if the guy he would never ever consider doing that. It just changes the whole interaction.
Yeah. Well, and it correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of seems like it would reinforce the idea that if if somebody doesn't do what we say, then we just hit them.
Yeah, it's might makes right, which is not a lesson we want to teach kids. We want to teach them, if you want to win the argument, you should provide reasonable, intelligent, informed arguments. You shouldn't just make people go along with what you want because you happen to be bigger or stronger.
Um, Also, I just had another thought pop in my head: is have have you ever, and I guess this is more just like insider knowledge, but have you ever come across a situation to where it was definitely something, uh, I guess for lack of a better term, like criminal? It's like something that's just not okay, to where you would have to contact uh, outside agencies. Like, is there any time where something's just like, whoa, you guys are like way further gone than I thought?
Yeah, I've never been in a situation where parents are abusing their kids actively to the point where I need to contact authorities. Usually, the people that come to me are the people that are already convinced, okay, I know I shouldn't be spanking my kids. Maybe they're hesitant or they're open to new ideas, but I've never had a client come to me who's actively saying, oh, I hit my kids all the time. I spank them. I give them the spoon, the belt, or anything.
Yeah.
And I just need you to tell me how to manipulate them better. Like that's just not the
Yeah.
kind of clientele that come to me asking for help.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you would have to be open minded to even attempt to try this in the first place. Um, have so since, because you tend to help the parents a bit more. I mean, they are the ones that had the kid, that are, it's their responsibility to show the kid how to move in this world. Um, which I do find kind of funny, because a lot of us adults don't even know how to move in this world. So it's rather difficult. But have you been working with a client and have them be like making some progress, but then reach that boundary where they have their mental walls like built up, and be like, well, and then try to give you some pushback to where you have to work with them a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, all the time there's people that they're mostly on board, but they're not sure, and they have a couple reservations, or they don't know exactly how it would play out. And this one client I was talking about, they would go in full pitch screaming battles, and he was telling me, I don't know at the end of the day if my kid is capable of reasoning, you know, and I was telling him, it's gonna take time. He's for 12 years, he's known nothing else except coercive parenting. It's gonna take him some time to build up that trust with you, and it's gonna take a little bit of patience on your end.
So it's definitely not hopeless then.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, and so studies will say 80 or 90% of the kid's personality is set by the time they're age 6. So a lot of it is getting the early years right. Those are really important. Now, 10 or 20% is still a lot of play. That's a lot of room to move, but getting the early years right really is that important. And you can't just put off parenting until they're teenagers. And by the time they're teenagers, they're just going to be reliving those patterns from the early years. So if you want to have credibility with your teenagers someday, you do need to be respectful and listening to them when, when things are in your court and when they are younger and have no option of leaving.
Um, One thing I'm curious about is, um, because this seems to be coming up a lot more, is single parenting. Um, Obviously, my opinion is that a dual parent household is ideal, but unfortunately, life isn't ideal sometimes. Um, so, do you offer? Um, well, obviously you would, but is this definitely something that single parents should embrace as well? Seeing how that they are taking on dual roles most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I would never recommend to anyone that they should just use violence or coercion in their parenting. Of course, I recommend for all parents, but like many things in life, the best parenting happens when you prevent issues before they happen rather than waiting until they happen and say, well, here's a disaster, fix it.
Yeah.
It's best to just prevent the disaster, right? And so if I would encourage, people before they have kids to do all the vetting they need to do to find out, is this person I'm having a child with going to stick around? Are they honorable? Because I guarantee you 100% of the time, there are always red flags ahead of time. And there are always ways to know. People will tell you exactly who they are before they're hightailing it after impregnating you, right? And so
Yeah.
there are resources out there, and if you have trauma from your childhood, it's essential, I believe, to get therapy to work through that trauma, and so that you don't pass that trauma on to your kids. Because people have, it's a very common theme. You could say almost everyone in the world that was traumatized that has kids is at high risk to pass on that trauma to their kids. It's just how we are as people. We repeat cycles. And so we need to stop those cycles. And it's very hard to stop those cycles, but with help, it can be done. And that's part of what I do for parents. I help them to not unpack their trauma as much, but just show them that it's happening and show them what they can do instead.
So, I guess my question from here, it really is that easy, is not using violence. And then I guess the hard part is if I'm a parent that has, used violence in the past, I have to come to terms with the fact that that's what happened. This might have hurt my relationship with my child. And now it's that the onus is on me to try and help change that and rebuild that trust.
Yeah, 100%. I'm a big proponent of parents taking 100% ownership. Um, yeah, it's their responsibility wherever the relationship is. It's the responsibility of the parent. And if a kid is misbehaving, somehow you model that behavior to them, or you put them around people who taught that to them, or somehow they were influenced. Maybe it's the school that they're in or whatever. And you need to take ownership for that. And it's never an excuse, no matter what kids are doing, there's never an excuse to abuse them, right? No one ever deserves to be abused. And so, as much as a parent can that's made those mistakes, they need to apologize, make restitution, make amends, commit to doing better, show them how they're changing, and give their kids a reason to trust them. And that's going to take time to build up that trust, but it can be done.
I absolutely love hearing that. It's really interesting just because I find it fascinating that within our culture, it's this isn't just the standard. Like, I mean, don't hit your kids, you know, like, and I know it's, I was spanked only a couple of times actually. Um, my mother was really good about that. Um, and I find it interesting um, that as a society we're just okay with being peaceful, or we're not okay with being peaceful as just the standard. What do you believe that a lot of this stems from? Do you think it's strictly just repeating abuse? Because this does come in cycles, or are there other extenuating circumstances that add to this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. There's the widely misquoted saying, spare the rod, spoil the child. A lot of Christians will be quoting that verse, and actually, it's not even in the Bible. That's not actually a verse. That's actually from some 18th century poem, which was talking about doing weird things with an adult partner. It's not actually talking about children at all, and it was satirical, right? So there's the widely misunderstood proverbial rod passages, which um, I've done a deep dive on this before. It's on my YouTube channel if anyone wants to check that out. But in short, it's actually talking about punishing criminals who are adult men. And adulthood in ancient Israel started at age 12 at puberty. And so technically, in our culture, a 12-year-old is considered a child, but back then they were a young man. So it's really a disingenuous interpretation of the text to call those people children, but that's how it's translated these days. And people take those verses and apply them to 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and say, okay, well, if I don't train up my child in the way he should go, he'll depart from the faith. And that's just a completely misunderstanding of the context. So there's that Christian aspect of it. But then there is just the societal belief that when you do something bad, you deserve to be punished. And people extend that to children, and they say, okay, well, you did something bad, and so now justice demands that I make you feel pain, or that I take something from you so that it's just, and I restore this balance. But really, the person that deserves anything more than the children is just the parents, because the parents are the ones responsible for the kids being that way in the first place. And so yeah, there's a few things there. And then also, like you said, the patterns of behavior are really hard to break from. And you could say we were kind of designed to live in these tribal settings for thousands of years. We only lived in a tribe of maybe our extended family of a few dozen people. And so if you ever change from the social norm, you're questioning the beliefs of your elders. And so the people that questioned their elders and said, actually, you guys are all child abusers, they either were just killed, or no one would let your daughter marry that guy. And they were kind of ostracized. So it's been naturally selected out of us, this idea of questioning the way things have always been. So that's one reason it is really hard to change the direction of culture, especially in regards to child rearing, which is a highly emotional and volatile topic.
Well, and especially the topic of spanking. Like, I mean, you're on Twitter, and I don't know if you've ever gotten involved in one of these Twitter battles, because I'm pretty sure that's just all the platform is. And I've gotten into discussions about spanking, and boy, there are some opponents that just love the hell out of it, and the way that they speak about it to me is disturbing. Um, because it's to me, I think a lot of people have good intentions, but they're just doing it wrong. But then there's also these other people that seem to enjoy it, which I'm not sure exactly the psychology behind that. But and maybe this is just them on Twitter and they're just acting out in a weird way, but there does seem to be in our culture a certain attraction specifically to spanking. And that just I think it also develops in very weird ways, as an adult. It manifests itself in some very odd sexual behaviors as we get older. Um, and you know, my opinion, that should probably be avoided for a healthy adult life. Um, so I'm not sure if you've noticed this on Twitter as well. Is just like there's some of these spanking advocates that at least at the very least seem to get the joy out of advocating for it.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about that kind of person. It's just they're pretty far gone if they're at that point. But I have met people in real life who have said, I really don't, I really didn't want to spank, but the Bible says I have to, right? So I just have to get over myself. But when they hear, actually, the Bible doesn't say you have to do that, they're so relieved. And thank goodness. And now they just have to say, okay, so what else is there? Because I think a lot of people just have no idea what else to do. It's so punishment is just so common that a lot of people just don't even know where to start with reasoning with their kids.
Well, and that's kind of our culture, right? It's just like you do bad, you be punished. Like, I mean, that's what we do with adults, and like, why would there be anything else? Like, it does make sense. Um, I do want to kind of ask about the religious aspect, because this does seem to be very common. Us largely being a Christian nation, I do try to keep things just in the U.S. to try and keep it as simple as possible. I know that there are some foreign listeners, and stuff like that, and any chance I can, I will gladly cover outside the U.S. But for the sake of keeping things simple, we'll just keep it here. Um, I am just curious. Well, first of all, let me ask: is there um, options for like uh, secular people? Obviously, not everyone's going to be religious, but nobody should beat their kids, regardless of what they believe. So, do you also offer, uh, you know, counseling, I guess, for people who are secular?
Yeah, I'd be happy to work with anyone that wants to learn how to reason with their kids. Yeah, it's certainly not dependent on your faith. And yeah, no, you don't need to have a religion in order to reason with your kids. It's just about how to have those conversations and how to structure them. And I'd be happy to have that conversation with anyone.
But on the other side of that, also, if somebody is religious, would you also entertain that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If they want to get into the Bible and talk scripture, I'd be happy to go there. If they want to stay strictly outside of that realm, I'm happy to just talk about practical steps we can take. I'm happy to go wherever the client wants to go and talk about whatever their whatever their hangups are. I'm happy to go with them and talk about those as well.
I absolutely love that. Um, but to touch just on the Christian side of things just a little bit more, because it seems so pervasive. Um, is that something that's very common? Is the spare the rod, spoil the child? Um, because people believe that this is a teaching, uh, and it very well may be, depending on somebody's particular church or their, what they were raised with. But is this something you come across a lot?
In my personal life, I have rarely met people who don't punish. A lot of people spank. A lot of people don't want to spank, but they'll still use timeouts or they'll take away things because they're a little uncomfortable with the physical punishment. But it's very uncommon, in my experience, to meet people that don't punish. Um, and I think that's a shame. And I think Christians need to step up and they need to grow. And I think a lot of people, I think it kind of stems from the idea of ending that cycle of abuse. But a lot of people in our culture, Christians as well, have trouble giving responsibility to their parents. Because if you can't say, my parents were wrong when they hit me, then now you can't say, well, it's wrong for me to hit my kids. The standard is the same. So either it was okay for them to treat me that way or it wasn't. And a lot of people have a hard time saying, my parents hurt me. And
Yeah.
so there is, the Bible is very clear: when your brother sins against you, go and talk to him. A lot of Christians kind of make this cop out answer and say, well, Jesus forgives, so I should forgive too, no questions asked. But that's not actually a biblical perspective, I would argue.
Well, and there's also honor thy mother and thy father, and it kind of seems like a bastardization to say, well, honoring them means I can't criticize them, which I entirely disagree with.
I would say that's quite dishonorable. It's almost treating them, well, it's an insult to say it's treating them like children. I would not insult children in that way. But yeah, it's quite honoring to give someone a responsibility. And some of sometimes the best way you can honor someone is to learn from their bad example and to do differently than them.
So, kind of to shift gears just a little bit, I'm very familiar with Stefan Molyneux, which is something you and I have bonded over, which anyone who doesn't needs to look up Stefan Molyneux. He has wonderful, wonderful shows all about peaceful parenting. Just look up Free Domain Radio, Peaceful Parenting, and it's absolutely wonderful.
And if I
Luke,
can jump in real quick,
of
he
course,
actually just finished his comprehensive book called Peaceful Parenting.
yes, he did. I haven't been able to find it. Where did he put it up on Amazon or just his website?
So I believe it's only available to donors. So if you're willing
Okay.
to donate $5, you can get access to the audiobook and the ebook.
Oh, that's so worth $5. That man, I know there's criticisms of him in other aspects and whatever, but in this specific topic, I think he's unmatched, and I think you were quickly on your way to definitely rise to that level.
I
So,
appreciate that.
of course. So one thing he brings up a lot, or has brought up, is, and I can't remember if it's exactly him that coined this idea, but that we could do away with world war all stemming all over the world, if we just do away with child abuse. Um, do you feel like that? Obviously, that's like a big idea, but do you feel that that actually could be achieved? Obviously, several generations down, but do you feel like we could actually reach that if we tackled this issue of child abuse?
Yeah, yeah. He's taken it even further, and I would go with him, and he would say that government itself would cease to exist if we parented without using coercion. That the only reason anyone grows up and chooses to vote for an authoritarian or to even entertain that kind of an idea that someone would tell them what to do and that would punish them for doing the wrong thing, that stems from a childhood where your parents did that exact thing to you. So authoritarianism in the home creates and leads to authoritarianism in the world when those kids grow up. So if we teach kids how to be voluntarists, how to be peaceful, and how to negotiate without the use of force, we won't grow up and use force either. And so, yeah, I completely agree with that line of thinking.
Yeah, I absolutely love the idea that, communism starts in childhood. And it is attractive once you get a little bit older and you start seeing that oppressor oppressed narrative, which, I mean, you're going to drive your kid to find communism attractive if you are an authoritarian in the home. And nobody wants their kids to be communist. Come on. so so yeah, that's a very interesting point. I would have to agree. I can't find any flaw, at least in the logic. So what is something that you have taken away from his teachings that just kind of like opened your mind, because you know those moments when like your mind expands and you're just like there's no going back.
Yeah, I mean, it might just be back when I was in college, hearing him talk about the non aggression principle. It sounds so elementary, but no one had ever said that. I'd never heard that before. And so, just the idea that it's not okay to aggress against someone except in self defense, it's so obvious, but our culture is so not in line with that. So much violence is done with, there's no, it's just so uncalled for. It's not self defense. We're hitting children. We're, you know, the government aggressing against people all the time, forcing them to do things or to not do things. And so that was a mind blown moment for me, for sure, that it really can be that simple, and there it is okay if there's just no exceptions to such a basic fundamental principle.
Yeah. Yeah. I say, and if you don't mind me asking, where did you kind of come across like this? Because I know I kind of came into this whole libertarian peaceful parenting, like all of these things, I kind of came into it through the Ron Paul pipeline, like I hit Ron Paul and then I just open up to this whole world of just philosophical thought that was never going to be introduced to me through any sort of institution. So where did you kind of enter into this philosophical realm?
Yeah, I grew up as kind of a normie conservative. Let's try to have government as small as it can be. I like that idea. I didn't like government that was too big, that was tyrannical. And so I was already kind of open to that line of thinking. You might even say minarchism, but maybe I wouldn't have taken it that far. But I had a friend in college who introduced to me these ideas, and he sent me a video of Stefan Molyneux's. It was very popular back in the day. It's called "The Story of Your Enslavement," and
Oh, yes.
It talks about how functionally taxpayers are cattle, and we're just on a big tax farm, open air prison, and they are taking advantage of people by taking their money when we don't really have an option. And so that kind of blew my mind, and that was the start of how I got into libertarianism.
Yeah, that's funny. It usually starts with the money, because my thing was the Federal Reserve. And find out that that's all fake, and then it's like, well, now I got to learn more. I didn't realize that the Federal Reserve isn't a federal institution, or that all of our money is actually just debt, and that just like in that video, that we are all tax slaves. And it's like slavery never ended. It just moved to a different form, and we got told that we were free, and the lie got repeated enough times to now we believe it. So yeah, that's funny that it usually starts with the money, and then as soon as you find out about any of that, and then it's kind of all downhill from there. But one thing I kind of want to ask is do you see more people kind of embracing this, like from your aspect, or are there many peers that are trying to also um, counsel parents? Like, do you have competitor or more competitors that are coming up? Is this becoming that popular?
Yeah, I do see people on Twitter, for example, embracing more of a reasonable line of thinking. I actually met someone in my church recently who just a few months ago, they have young children, and now they're saying, I had never thought about this before. I had never entertained this idea. My parents were far from peaceful parenting, but this is so compelling, so interesting. Like I knew it had to be something like this, but I could never put words to it. And so, yeah, I am seeing more and more people swing that way.
So we'll start wrapping up here because I don't want to keep you too long, and plus, we had to push it back and everything. But um, one thing I do want to ask. Um, so say I'm a parent watching this, and I am enamored by this, and I want to learn more, but life. So what what can I, a parent, do right now today? What can I start doing today? What, like one to three things, just like what can I change today to start down this path?
Yeah. So I would say you need to make a commitment to take full 100% ownership and responsibility of your household and of your children and who they're becoming. And so there's this common excuse that I hear all the time on Twitter, and it's, my parents did the best with the knowledge they had. They did the best they could. And I just call BS on that. How do you know that? And if, that's like saying if kick the door open of the cockpit on an airplane and you start steering the plane and you crash. You say, well, it's okay. He did the best he could with the knowledge he had. He didn't know how to fly a plane. Of course he crashed. Well, maybe he shouldn't have decided to get behind the wheel of a plane, right? And
Yeah.
So having kids is a choice. You chose this, and you owe it to your kids to be a good parent and to figure out how to parent. It's not an excuse that you don't know what to do. You need to figure out. So I can't tell you how many thousands of books there are on parenting. There are, so many awesome podcasts, resources out there, Twitter accounts like mine, YouTube channels. Yeah, I'd say just start reading. If you need more resources, I can get specific with you on Twitter. I have a whole thread listing a bunch of books that I recommend. And like we said, Stefan Molyneux's Peaceful Parenting book is an excellent resource. I highly recommend it. And yeah, just take full ownership and don't give yourself a single excuse. You can do this. There are tons of resources out there, and all you have to do is take advantage of them.
Hey, I think that's great. So if people want to learn more, where can they find you? What do they have to do to get a hold of you to get at your services? Like, what do you have going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at peaceful_tips. I'm on YouTube at The Peaceful Parenting Show. If you want to work with me, you can use the links in my Twitter bio, and you can send me a direct message if you want to see if we're a good fit. And yeah, you can look into all the content I'm putting out there about peaceful parenting.
Hey, everyone, episode description, you can find the links to get a hold of Luke. I highly recommend what he's doing. I do want to say this, and let me know if you agree, Luke, that I think what makes a bad parent is somebody who's not willing to change, who's not willing to improve. So might be hard to admit that there is a problem, but if you know that there's a problem and you do nothing, I think that's what a truly bad parent is. And so I would say to everyone, if you're at the point where I mean, this has happened, you're not a bad parent unless you don't do anything about it. So I'm not sure how you feel about that, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the wrong and you refuse to admit it, certainly that doesn't make you a good parent. And yeah, if if you're shifting responsibility to your child instead of to you, I don't think that's a very responsible thing to do. I think you need to be the adult in the relationship, not leave it up to your 3-year-old to decide what happens to him and what he deserves. So yeah. I'm on board with you.
All right. Hey, Luke, thank you so much for coming on. I hope everyone found this very useful. Go ahead, hit that like, subscribe, share button. If you found this useful or you think somebody else will find this useful, please share this. I think this is the start of a revolution, and it all starts in the home, and it starts with peaceful parenting. And this is really, in my opinion, the way that we will find our liberty that we have lost is we start with the battles in the home. I think this is, whether it be the food, our water, our air, the parenting, everything, it's all starting in the home. We are losing the battle in the home. That's where it starts. So take control, or I guess as Jordan Peterson says, clean up your room, So, but hey, I want to get you back because I think there's a lot more we can deep dive into this, and there's a lot of wonderful things that would just take too long to get into today. But I definitely want you back. And last thing I want to ask, I always end on this. I want to ask, in your opinion, why does liberty matter?
It matters because, we have certain God-given rights, and anytime you deprive someone of liberty, you're not treating someone with the inherent respect they deserve. We're all made in the image of God, and everyone deserves certain rights. They deserve to be treated a certain way. And so liberty is, you could say, just as important or far more important in the home as it is outside the home in the government and in the wider world. And so if you oppose authoritarianism in the government, I'd say don't be an authoritarian at home.
Hey, that's super based. So, hey, thank you once again. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and make sure subscribe, risetoliberty.com/links. And until next time, stay free, my friends. Hang out, Luke, and we'll finish up on the back end.